"You're coming with me," said the cowboys softly. After finding her on the cold ground, her body, the morning was colder than usual. A thin layer of frost covered the dry grass, and the sky had the soft, pale gray of early dawn. Eli, a cowboy with a weathered hat and worn boots, rode slowly along the empty prairie trail. His horse's hooves crunched lightly on the frozen ground, and every now and then the wind would whip across the plain, carrying a sharp, icy bite that made him pull his coat tighter. He had been riding for hours, following no particular path, just checking the land and making sure nothing had gone wrong while he was away. The prairie had a quiet that was both beautiful and lonely, a stillness that could make someone feel like they were the only person left in the world. As he rode, Eli noticed something unusual. At first he thought it was a shadow or maybe a clump of weeds moving with the wind, but then he saw her. She was lying on the ground a few yards off the trail. Her body was curled slightly, as if she were trying to make herself small against the cold. Her hair was tangled and wet, and frost had begun to cling to her clothes. Her face was pale, and her lips were blue from the cold. Something about her presence made Eli's chest tighten. He had seen many things in his life: storms, wild animals, broken fences, but this was different. He nudged his horse forward slowly, speaking softly so as not to startle her. "Hey, are you okay?" he said. The sound of his voice seemed to stir her, though it took a moment. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a second she looked confused, almost frightened. Then she shivered violently and let out a weak, barely audible sound. Eli could see that she was injured. There were small cuts on her arms, and her clothes were torn in several places. He could also tell she was very cold, and the way she trembled showed that she might be close to hypothermia. Without a second thought, he dismounted and approached her carefully. He didn't know her story yet, and he didn't need to. Right now, she needed help, and he was the only one there to give it. He knelt down beside her, careful not to scare her. "It's all right. I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently, reaching out his hand. She didn't speak, only looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. Eli noticed her hands were raw and chapped from the cold. He took off his scarf and wrapped it loosely around her shoulders. "Can you stand?" he asked, softly. She tried to push herself up, but her legs wobbled and gave out. Eli acted quickly, supporting her under her arms. "It's okay, I've got you. Don't try to fight it." She leaned against him, shivering so hard that he could feel her teeth chattering against the scarf. He looked around. The nearest town was miles away, and the frost made the ground slippery and uneven. The wind was picking up, making the prairie feel even colder. He realized that walking her to safety would take too long and could be dangerous. He glanced at his horse, which was standing patiently, nostrils flaring in the cold air. An idea came to him. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, though still fragile in his grasp. "You're coming with me," he said softly, not as a command, but as reassurance. Eli swung himself onto the horse, holding her carefully in front of him. The horse adjusted to the weight, stepping cautiously over the frozen ground. At first, she was tense, gripping his jacket weakly. Then, after a moment, she relaxed slightly, letting him guide her. The prairie seemed endless, stretching in every direction with nothing but dry grass, rocks, and distant hills. The cold air stung their faces, but the movement of the horse brought some warmth, and Eli kept talking to her, keeping her conscious.
"What's your name?" he asked, keeping his voice low so it would be easier for her to respond.
"Clara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Clara, all right, Clara. I'm Eli. We're going to be okay," he said. Her eyes flicked up at him briefly, searching his face for honesty. Eli gave her a small, reassuring smile. He didn't know how far they were from help, but he knew he would not leave her alone here. He had spent years riding these lands, and he understood the dangers of the prairie, the freezing nights, the hidden ditches, the wolves that sometimes roamed close to settlements. As they rode, Clara began to shiver less. The warmth of his coat and the steady motion of the horse helped a little. Eli noticed she kept her head down, staring at her hands wrapped in his scarf. He respected her silence. Some people needed time before they could trust, and he wasn't going to rush her. The morning passed slowly. The sun tried to peek through the clouds but barely warmed the frozen prairie. Occasionally they would pass a fence, broken in places, or the skeleton of an old building. Eli would guide the horse around these obstacles, careful not to jolt her. He also kept an eye out for predators or other dangers, though none appeared. His mind, however, kept drifting back to her. Why was she out here alone? What had happened to her? He didn't ask yet. He would wait until she was ready. Right now, all that mattered was getting her somewhere safe. After what felt like hours, they reached the edge of a small creek. The water was partially frozen, and the horse had to step carefully across it. Clara gasped slightly at the cold and tried to pull herself closer to Eli. He whispered soothing words, and she clung to him a little tighter. Once across, they moved through a small copse of trees that offered some shelter from the wind. It wasn't much, but it was better than the open prairie. Wise. By mid-morning, Eli spotted a small cabin in the distance, smoke rising from its chimney. Relief washed over him. The cabin was modest, built of weathered wood, but it would provide warmth and safety. He guided the horse carefully toward it. As they approached, Clara began to stir more, her eyes showing the faintest hint of curiosity. Eli noticed her gaze wander to the cabin, and he knew she was beginning to hope that maybe things would be okay. Once they reached the cabin, Eli helped her down from the horse and into the shelter. He led her to the hearth and built a small fire, the flames crackling and sending waves of warmth into the room. Clara sank to the floor beside it, grateful for the heat, her hands held out toward the flames. Eli handed her a cup of water and a clean blanket. Drink. Rest.
"You're safe now," he said. She nodded faintly, still too exhausted to speak.
Eli studied her for a moment, noticing how fragile she looked against the warmth of the cabin. She was small, yet there was something about her that suggested quiet strength, a survival instinct that had kept her alive on the cold prairie. He knew the road ahead would not be easy for her, but he also knew that she had a chance now. He would make sure of it. As the day passed, Eli worked quietly around the cabin, preparing food, chopping some wood, and making sure the space was warm and secure. Clara stayed by the fire, occasionally glancing up at him. The trust between them was growing slowly, built on actions rather than words. She hadn't spoken much, but the look in her eyes told Eli that she knew he was someone who could be relied upon. By the time the sun started to dip below the horizon, Clara had gathered enough strength to sit up fully. She looked around the cabin, taking in the simple but safe surroundings. Eli offered her a warm meal, and she accepted, eating slowly but deliberately. It was a small victory, but it mattered. For the first time since he had found her on the frozen ground, Eli saw a spark of life in her eyes that had been nearly extinguished. That night, as the wind howled outside, Eli sat near the fire and watched over Clara as she drifted off to sleep. The prairie was still cold and dangerous, but for now, they were safe. He had rescued her from the frost, but he knew that the journey ahead, both for her recovery and understanding why she had been out there alone, would take time. Still, as he looked at her sleeping peacefully, he felt a quiet sense of purpose. He had done what he could, and that was enough for tonight. The next morning the cabin was quiet except for the faint crackling of the fire. The wind had calmed a little, but the prairie remained cold, the grass stiff with frost, and the sky painted a pale blue. Clara woke slowly, the warmth of the cabin and the fire keeping her from shivering. She had slept better than she remembered in days. Her body still ached, but for the first time she felt a tiny sense of safety, a fragile hope that someone had cared enough to help her. Eli was already awake, tending to the small stove and preparing a simple breakfast of porridge and tea. The smell of the food filled the cabin, making it feel less like a shelter and more like a home. He moved quietly so as not to startle her, glancing over at her as she stirred. She looked smaller than before, fragile and delicate, but there was a spark of determination in her eyes. Even in her weakened state, she seemed to be studying the cabin, learning its sounds and textures, familiarizing herself with a place that was suddenly her temporary haven. "Good morning," Eli said softly, giving her a small smile. "Sleep okay?" Clara nodded slowly, her voice hoarse. "Better than outside." Eli handed her a bowl of porridge and a mug of tea. "Eat slowly. You need your strength," he said. She took a spoon and began to eat, the warm food comforting her in a way that words could not. Eli watched her quietly, noticing how careful she was, how she seemed to take in every small detail, the way the sunlight fell through the window, the faint creak of the wooden floor, the smell of the fire. She was cautious, learning to trust the world again after whatever had happened to her. Once she had eaten, Eli cleared the table and looked outside. The sun was rising higher now, and the prairie glimmered with frost in the early light. "We should move a little today," he said. "I want you to stretch your legs, get some fresh air. It's not far, just around the cabin, but it'll help you feel stronger." Clara hesitated for a moment, glancing down at her sore limbs. Then she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. She wasn't ready to speak about what had happened to her, but even small steps like this were progress. Eli helped her up and guided her outside. The cold air hit her cheeks, sharp, but not as unbearable as before. The sunlight glinted on the frost-covered grass, and the prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of white and pale green. Clara took a shaky step, then another, feeling her legs grow stronger with each movement. Eli stayed close, always ready to support her if she faltered. "You're doing fine," he said. "Slow and steady. That's all that matters." She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his for the first real moment of connection since he had found her. There was gratitude there, silent but powerful. She didn't have to speak it. He understood. After a while, Eli suggested they take the horse out for a short ride. "It'll help both of us," he said. "You'll get used to the movement, and it'll make the prairie feel less scary." Clara agreed, though with some hesitation. Eli led the horse closer and gently helped her onto the saddle, showing her how to balance. He mounted behind her, careful to keep his arms around her for support. The horse began to move slowly, its hooves crunching over the frost. Clara's initial fear melted away as the rhythm of the ride soothed her, and soon she was able to hold on without gripping him too tightly. As they rode, Eli stayed quiet, letting her take in the sights. The prairie was alive with subtle movement, birds flitting from tree to tree, the distant rumble of a creek, the sway of tall grasses in the wind. The sun climbed higher, and the warmth began to ease the chill. Clara felt herself relax, her thoughts quieting. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to notice beauty without fear. After returning to the cabin, Eli suggested a simple task, gathering firewood. "It'll help you get some exercise and keep your mind busy," he said. Clara hesitated, but she followed him to a nearby pile of logs. They worked together, carrying small bundles of wood back to the cabin. Their conversation was minimal, mostly about practical matters: how to stack the wood, which pieces were dry, and how to build the fire safely. Even without words, a bond was forming between them. Eli respected her pace, never rushing her, never asking more than she was ready to give. By afternoon, Clara began to talk a little about herself. She told Eli about her hometown, a small village far from the prairie, and about her family who she had left behind in search of something better. Though she didn't go into details about the danger she had faced, Eli listened patiently, never interrupting, nodding gently when appropriate. His quiet presence made it easier for her to speak, and she began to feel that maybe she didn't have to carry her burdens alone anymore. As the day passed, Eli continued to show her the ways of the land. He taught her how to identify which plants were safe to eat, how to track the movement of animals in the snow, and how to read the clouds for signs of weather. Clara absorbed everything with fascination. The practical knowledge wasn't just survival. It was a reminder that the world was not entirely harsh, that there were skills she could learn and use to protect herself. The evening brought a soft pink and orange glow across the horizon. The fire inside the cabin flickered and danced, casting shadows on the walls. Clara and Eli sat together, tired but content, watching the colors shift in the sky. She realized that for the first time in a long time she had felt safe, and that safety had come not from walls or locks, but from someone choosing to care for her. "Ellie," she said quietly, hesitating. "Why? Why did you help me?" He thought for a moment, then smiled softly. "Because it was the right thing to do. No one should be left out there alone in the cold. Everyone deserves a chance to survive, to feel safe." Clara nodded slowly, taking in his words. She didn't fully understand the depth of his kindness yet, but she felt it, and that was enough for now. That night, after supper, Eli prepared a warm bed for Clara near the fire. He gave her clean blankets and showed her how to tuck herself in comfortably. She lay down, feeling the warmth seep into her bones. He sat nearby, watching over her, ensuring she was comfortable and safe. The wind howled outside, rattling the cabin, but inside there was a quiet peace. Clara drifted off to sleep with the feeling that she was not alone, that someone had her back, and that she might just survive whatever challenges lay ahead. Eli, watching her sleep, thought about the road that had brought them together. It had been unexpected, dangerous, and full of uncertainty. But he knew one thing for sure: she had strength, even if she didn't realize it yet, and together they could face whatever came next. The night passed slowly, but unlike before, it felt safe and calm. The prairie could be harsh and unforgiving, but inside that small cabin, with firelight dancing on the walls and the sound of the wind outside, two people had begun to trust each other. They had begun to understand that survival was not just about escaping danger, but also about finding connection, hope, and courage in the unlikeliest of places. The next morning, the cabin felt warmer and brighter than it had the day before. The sun rose slowly, spilling soft gold light across the frost-covered prairie. Clara awoke before Eli, listening to the quiet sounds of the cabin, the soft crackle of the dying embers in the fire, the creak of the wooden roof, and the faint whistle of the wind outside. She stretched carefully, mindful of the small aches in her muscles. She felt stronger than yesterday, though still cautious. Eli was already up, outside feeding the horse and checking the small vegetable patch that had survived the winter frost. The sight of him calmly moving about the cabin made Clara feel a little more at ease. She realized how much care went into even simple routines, keeping a horse healthy, maintaining firewood, and ensuring a roof over their heads. Everything Eli did seemed effortless, yet she sensed the years of hard work and experience behind each motion. When Eli noticed her watching from the doorway, he gave her a small smile. "Morning," he said. "Sleep well?" "Better," Clara replied, her voice still soft but steadier than before. "Good," Eli said, nodding. "We'll have breakfast soon. Today we'll do some more work outside. You'll be able to help a little. It's good for your strength." Clara hesitated, thinking of her sore muscles, but there was a determination in her that made her nod. She didn't want to feel weak anymore, and she wanted to prove to herself that she could handle life on the prairie, even if only in small ways for now. After a warm breakfast of porridge and fresh tea, Eli suggested they work together on the cabin's fence. "Some of it has been broken by snow and wind," he explained. "If we fix it, it will keep animals from getting too close and protect us from the wind a little better." Clara listened carefully and followed his instructions. She carried the lighter pieces of wood while Eli lifted and held the heavier ones. With each plank they put in place, the fence grew stronger, and Clara felt a sense of accomplishment. She realized that simple tasks like this were more than just chores. They were a reminder that small actions could make a difference, and that she could take control of her surroundings instead of feeling helpless. As they worked, Eli shared stories of the prairie. He spoke of storms he had faced, animals he had encountered, and travelers he had met over the years. His stories were full of quiet wisdom, often funny in small, unexpected ways, and Clara found herself laughing softly for the first time in a long while. She realized how much she had missed these small comforts: laughter, sunlight, and the feeling of accomplishment from hard work. During a short break, Eli handed her some water and encouraged her to rest. Clara sat on a fallen log looking out over the prairie. The wind had died down, and the sunlight sparkled across the frost like tiny diamonds. For a moment she let herself breathe, feeling a strange mixture of peace and curiosity. She wanted to ask Eli about himself, about how he had learned to survive on the prairie, but the words wouldn't come yet. She wasn't ready to break the silence fully, but she felt comforted just being near someone who cared. By midday they had finished the fence, and Clara felt a quiet pride. Her hands were sore, her arms tired, but the fence stood solid and straight. Eli looked at her and nodded approvingly. "You did well," he said. "I'm proud of you." Clara's cheeks warmed at the praise. It was strange to hear someone acknowledge her efforts, especially when she had spent so long feeling invisible or powerless. She realized that being recognized, even in small ways, could be powerful. After lunch, Eli suggested they check on the horse and teach Clara a little about riding. At first, she was nervous, her mind recalling the fear she had felt when Eli first lifted her onto the saddle. But he was patient, guiding her slowly, showing her how to sit properly, how to balance, and how to communicate with the horse using gentle movements and soft words. Clara felt the horse respond to her, its ears twitching and hooves stepping steadily. She realized that, like the prairie itself, patience and care could bring trust and cooperation. As they rode together through a small valley near the cabin, Eli told Clara to look at the world differently. "The prairie teaches you to notice small things," he said. "A change in the wind, the way a bird moves, the pattern of tracks in the snow. These things tell stories if you pay attention." Clara listened, her eyes scanning the landscape, and she began to notice details she had never seen before. A family of rabbits darting among tall grasses, a hawk gliding high above, and the way the sunlight caught the frost on a fallen branch. She felt connected to the land in a way she had never imagined. Returning to the cabin, they spent the afternoon tending to small repairs. Eli showed her how to patch the roof, mend the walls, and prepare the fire for the night. Each task was simple but necessary, and Clara felt a growing sense of confidence. She realized that survival wasn't just about escaping danger. It was about learning skills, observing carefully, and taking responsibility for small things that could make life better and safer. During a quiet moment by the fire, Clara spoke softly. "Eli, I want to thank you," she said, "for finding me and helping me. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Eli shook his head gently. "No need to thank me. I did what anyone would do. You needed help, and I could give it. That's all." Clara looked down at her hands, feeling the warmth of the fire on her face. "I know, but still, it matters to me. More than I can say." Eli nodded, understanding without pressing her for more words. There were some things that didn't need to be said aloud. The trust and care between them were already clear. As evening approached, the sky turned soft pink and orange, and the temperature dropped again. Eli prepared a warm meal while Clara helped set the table, a small but meaningful routine that gave her a sense of normalcy. They ate quietly, the sounds of the prairie outside mixing with the gentle crackle of the fire. It was peaceful, almost ordinary, yet for Clara, it felt extraordinary. She realized that safety, warmth, and human connection were not things to take for granted. After dinner, Eli suggested they take a short walk outside to enjoy the evening air before settling in for the night. Clara hesitated but followed him, bundled in layers of blankets and scarves. The prairie was quiet except for the distant call of a bird and the whisper of wind through the grass. The sky was painted in shades of violet and gold, and Clara felt a strange calmness she hadn't felt in a long time. "You see," Eli said, "the prairie may seem harsh, but it also has its own beauty. You just have to notice it. And it teaches you patience. Patience with the land, with others, and even with yourself." Clara looked at him, her mind absorbing his words. But she thought about the fear she had felt when she had first been lost and alone, about the cold nights and the long hours of uncertainty. She realized that the prairie had tested her, but with Eli's help, she had survived. She had learned small lessons each day, and she was growing stronger, not just physically, but in spirit. That night, back inside the cabin, Eli prepared her bed near the fire again. The warmth enveloped her, and she felt her body relax fully for the first time in weeks. She closed her eyes, feeling the quiet reassurance of someone watching over her. It was a small comfort, but it meant everything. She drifted off to sleep with thoughts of the day, the fence they had built, the horse she had learned to ride, and the small but powerful sense of accomplishment she had felt. Eli stayed nearby, tending to the fire and quietly observing the dark prairie beyond the cabin walls. He knew that challenges would come, and that Clara's journey of recovery and self-discovery was only beginning. But he also knew that each small step mattered. Trust was growing, strength was returning, and hope, fragile but real, had begun to take root. In the quiet of the night, the prairie seemed less threatening. The wind was gentle, and the frost shimmered softly in the moonlight. Inside the cabin, two people had begun to form a bond, one born from necessity, strengthened by care, and deepened by mutual respect. For Clara, the journey ahead would be difficult, but with Eli by her side, she felt a courage she had not known she possessed. And for Eli, the day had proven once again that even in the harshest places, small acts of kindness and quiet patience could create safety, hope, and trust. The cabin, the fire, and the quiet prairie were more than a shelter. They were the beginning of a new chapter, one that neither of them had expected, but both had come to rely upon. The morning air was sharp and cold, carrying the faint scent of frost and earth. Clara awoke with a start, her senses alert. Something felt different today. She couldn't place it at first. The prairie was usually quiet, almost empty. But there was a subtle tension in the air, like the wind had shifted, whispering warnings only the careful could hear. She pulled the blankets closer and sat up slowly, her mind replaying the previous days of safety and warmth. For the first time she felt uneasy, aware that even in moments of peace, the world outside could change suddenly. Eli was already up, feeding the horse and checking the cabin's perimeter. His movements were calm, almost methodical, but Clara noticed a small crease in his forehead, a shadow of concern she hadn't seen before. When he saw her, he offered a small nod. "Morning," he said quietly. "Sleep well?" Clara nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She noticed that Eli's hands were slightly tighter on the reins of the horse, his eyes scanning the horizon more carefully than usual. There was a quiet vigilance about him now, one that Clara had not fully understood until she saw it in action. After breakfast, Eli suggested they do some chores outside, and Clara followed, though her attention was divided. While she carried firewood and helped mend the fence, her eyes wandered to the distant hills. The prairie, though familiar now, seemed suddenly larger, and she felt the weight of vulnerability she hadn't noticed before. Each rustle of grass, each shadow moving in the sunlight, reminded her of how fragile safety could be. Around midday, the tension she had sensed became real. From the corner of the prairie, Clara spotted two men on horseback, riding at a steady but purposeful pace toward the cabin. She froze, unsure if they had seen her, her heart pounding in her chest. Eli, however, noticed immediately. His eyes narrowed, scanning the figures as they grew closer. He didn't panic, but the careful calm he had maintained for days shifted into alert focus. "Stay close to me," he said softly, his voice steady but firm. Clara moved beside him, feeling both fear and trust. She didn't need to ask why. She knew he would protect her. The two men were still some distance away, but there was no mistaking their intent. They were looking for someone, and she had a sinking feeling she was the reason. Eli moved quickly, but with quiet precision. He guided Clara behind the cabin, out of sight from the approaching riders. "We need to be careful," he whispered. "Don't make any noise, and follow my lead." Clara nodded, her pulse racing. She clutched the scarf around her shoulders, shivering from more than just the cold. This was the first real danger she had faced since arriving at the cabin, and she felt the sharp edge of fear mixed with adrenaline. The men drew closer, their voices faint but carrying over the prairie. Clara could hear fragments of words, questions and demands, and she realized they were looking for her. Eli stayed calm, crouching behind a stack of firewood, and whispered instructions. "When they get near the cabin, we move. Stick close to me, and whatever happens, don't panic." Clara's mind raced. She had spent the last days learning to trust, to feel safe, and now that safety felt fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment. She swallowed her fear and focused on Eli's presence beside her. He had taught her to pay attention, to notice details, and to trust her instincts. Now she clung to that trust like a lifeline. As the men reached the cabin, Ellie acted with careful speed. He had known this might happen, though he had hoped it wouldn't. He guided Clara to a hidden path behind the cabin, one that led through a small grove of trees and eventually toward the creek. The men dismounted, their eyes scanning the cabin, their hands resting near the saddles of their horses. Eli and Clara moved silently, using the terrain to remain unseen, ducking behind rocks and low branches. Clara felt the tension building with every step, her muscles coiled, ready to run or react if needed. The creek offered both a path and a barrier. Eli paused to let Clara catch her breath. "We're not far," he said quietly. "Once we cross, we'll be out of sight. Keep your head down and move with me." Clara nodded, gripping the scarf tighter, her eyes fixed on the water. The current was gentle but icy, and she hesitated for a moment before stepping carefully onto the slippery stones. Eli was close behind, steadying her, ensuring each step was safe. Once across, they moved quickly but cautiously through the trees, putting as much distance between themselves and the men as possible. Clara's heart was racing, but she felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The world she had begun to see as safe was revealing its harsher side, and she realized that survival was about more than warmth and shelter. It was about awareness, courage, and quick thinking. After what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes, they paused in a small clearing surrounded by tall grasses. Eli turned to her and gave a reassuring nod.
"You're doing well," he said. "I need you to trust me completely right now."
"Keep calm and we'll be okay," Clara nodded, feeling the strength of his presence. His calmness grounded her, reminding her that even in danger, careful action and trust could make a difference. They watched as the men moved closer to the creek, searching in frustration. Eli whispered that the men would eventually leave, unable to find them without risking exposure. Clara realized the truth in his words and felt a surge of relief, though she remained on edge. The danger wasn't gone entirely, but it had passed for now, and she understood that trust and vigilance were tools just as vital as warmth and food. By late afternoon, they returned to the cabin. Eli moved quickly to secure the doors and windows, making sure everything was as safe as possible. Clara helped, her hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline but steady enough to follow instructions. They rebuilt some of the broken fence sections, making it harder for anyone to approach unnoticed. Each plank they set in place felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of control over a world that had threatened to overwhelm them. Afterward, they sat together by the fire. Clara held a warm mug of tea, her hand still trembling slightly, but her mind was clearer. I thought they might take me," she said quietly, her voice tight with emotion. "I thought, I wouldn't make it," Ellie nodded, understanding. "You're safe now. Why? And you survived. That's what matters. The rest is just learning and growing stronger." Clara looked at him, realizing that his calm determination had guided them both through danger. He hadn't panicked, hadn't made mistakes, and his experience had kept them safe. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and a growing respect for him, not just for his skills, but for his quiet courage and care. The evening passed with a fragile peace. They ate a simple meal, and Clara felt a new determination growing inside her. She realized that danger would always be part of life on the prairie, but so would moments of safety, warmth, and companionship. Each day, each small act taught her that survival was about learning, adapting, and trusting those who cared. That night, as Clara lay near the fire, she reflected on the events of the day. She had faced fear directly, yet she had not faltered. She had trusted Eli, and together they had navigated the threat. She realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting despite it, finding strength in moments when everything felt uncertain. Eli watched over her again, ensuring that the fire burned steadily and that the cabin remained secure. He thought about the unpredictable nature of the prairie and the importance of preparedness. The world outside was harsh and could change without warning, but small actions, patience, and care could create safety, even in the midst of danger. As Clara drifted into sleep, she felt the quiet confidence that comes from surviving something frightening and knowing that someone had her back. The prairie outside remained cold and vast, but inside the cabin, trust and care had created a safe space, a place where courage could grow and hope could take root. In those quiet hours, both of them understood something important. Danger might come again, but together they had learned how to face it. Each step, each small action, had brought them closer to understanding that survival was not just about avoiding harm, but about building resilience, trust, and the strength to keep moving forward. The next morning, the cabin was quiet, bathed in soft golden light. As the sun rose over the frost-covered prairie, Clara woke with a sense of calm she had not felt in a long time. The events of the previous days, the cold, the fear, the chase, and the trust she had begun to build with Eli, were still vivid in her mind, but for the first time she felt a quiet confidence. She knew she had survived, and that she had grown stronger in ways she hadn't realized. Eli was already awake, moving with practiced ease around the cabin. He was tending to the horse first, checking its hooves and making sure it had water, then stacking more firewood for the coming night. Clara watched him from the doorway, a small smile forming on her face. She realized just how much routine and care went into surviving on the prairie. It wasn't just about strength, it was about attention, patience, and understanding the land. "Morning," Eli said softly when he noticed her. "Sleep well?" "Yes," Clara replied, her voice steady. She stepped outside, the cold air hitting her cheeks, but it no longer made her shiver uncontrollably. She felt alert, aware, and capable. Today felt different. The danger that had lurked yesterday seemed distant, and for the first time, Clara felt the prairie as something more than a challenge or a threat. It was a place of possibility, of learning, and, unexpectedly, of peace. After a simple breakfast, Eli suggested they take a walk along the ridge near the cabin. Clara agreed, eager to stretch her legs and explore more of the land. As they walked, Eli taught her how to read the signs of the prairie, the tracks left by deer, the way the grass bent to show the direction of the wind, and the subtle shifts in the clouds that hinted at changing weather. Clara listened carefully, absorbing each lesson. She felt a growing sense of empowerment. The world around her was no longer just a place of danger. It was a place she could understand, navigate, and respect. As they reached the top of the ridge, they paused to take in the view. The prairie stretched endlessly, dotted with small clusters of trees and shimmering streams that caught the sunlight. Clara felt a deep sense of awe. She realized how far she had come from the frightened, shivering girl Eli had found on the frozen ground. Now she could stand tall, breathe deeply, and appreciate the beauty and vastness of the world around her. Eli stood beside her quietly, letting her absorb the scene. "You've come a long way," he said, "not just in strength, but in spirit. You're learning to trust yourself as well as others. That's the hardest part." Clara nodded slowly. She thought about the fear she had felt, the trust she had placed in Eli, and the small victories of each day. The fence they built, the horse she learned to ride, and the careful steps they had taken to avoid danger. Each act, each lesson had made her stronger and more capable. By midday, they returned to the cabin, where Clara suggested helping Eli with some chores. She carried firewood, swept the floor, and tended to the small vegetable patch. Each task gave her a sense of purpose and accomplishment. Eli watched her with quiet pride. He saw not just survival, but growth. Clara was learning to reclaim control over her life, and that was more important than anything else. As the day passed, they shared stories about their pasts. Clara spoke of her family and village, of dreams she had once had, and of the struggles she had faced. She didn't go into all the painful details, but she shared enough to feel lighter, unburdening herself slowly. Eli listened without judgment, offering occasional stories from his own life on the prairie. His tales were simple, full of practical wisdom, and often quiet humor. But Clara laughed softly at times, a sound that felt freeing after days of fear and silence. Later in the afternoon, Eli suggested they check the perimeter of the cabin. Clara followed closely, her eyes scanning the landscape for anything unusual. She had learned to be observant, to notice the details that could indicate danger or opportunity. As they walked, Eli pointed out subtle changes in the land, tracks in the snow, the marks of animals, and the signs of shifting weather. Clara felt capable now, understanding the language of the prairie in ways she never thought possible. After returning, they prepared a simple dinner. As they ate, the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the prairie in shades of pink, orange, and purple. Clara felt a deep sense of contentment, a feeling she had not known in a long time. The cabin, the fire, the food, and Eli's quiet presence combined to create a sense of safety and belonging that was almost overwhelming in its simplicity. Once the meal was finished, Clara helped Eli wash the dishes and tidy the cabin. They worked side by side, a silent rhythm between them that spoke of trust and mutual respect. Clara realized that she was no longer afraid of being alone. She had learned to rely on herself, to understand her surroundings, and to trust someone who had proven trustworthy. This realization brought a quiet joy, a sense of achievement that went beyond survival. As night fell, Eli prepared the bed near the fire, and Clara settled in, feeling the warmth seep into her bones. She thought about the journey she had taken, from the frozen ground where Eli had found her, to the dangerous encounter with the men, to this moment of calm and security. She realized that she had grown stronger, braver, and more aware. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. Eli sat nearby, watching the fire and keeping a quiet vigil. He thought about the journey as well. He had rescued Clara, yes, but he had also seen her transform. The girl who had arrived on the prairie, fragile and fearful, was now capable, aware, and growing in strength every day. He knew that the world outside the cabin could be harsh and unpredictable, but he also knew that Clara had what it took to face it. The following morning, the prairie was calm, the frost glistening in the early light. Clara awoke feeling rested and ready to continue learning. She helped Eli with morning chores, fed the horse, and carried water. Each action, though simple, reinforced her confidence and skill. She realized that survival was about preparation, observation, and small consistent actions, and she felt proud of how far she had come. After breakfast, Eli suggested they take a longer ride across the prairie. Clara felt a thrill of excitement mixed with confidence. She had learned to ride the horse well, and now she could explore more, understand the land, and see the world beyond the cabin. They rode together, moving carefully but confidently across the frost-covered grass. Clara felt a freedom she had not known before, a connection to the land, to the horse, and to herself. As the sun climbed higher, they stopped on a small hill, looking out over the endless prairie. Clara felt a sense of accomplishment and hope. She realized that she had survived not just because Eli had helped her, but because she had found courage within herself. The fear and uncertainty that had once ruled her life were now tempered by skill, knowledge, and trust. By evening, they returned to the cabin, where the warmth of the fire and the comfort of routine awaited them. Clara prepared the meal while Eli stacked firewood. They worked side by side, their quiet cooperation a testament to the bond they had formed. Clara reflected on the days that had passed, the cold, the fear, the danger, and now the sense of hope and possibility. She realized that life on the prairie was hard, yes, but it was also full of lessons, beauty, and opportunities for growth. As night fell, Clara settled near the fire, wrapped in blankets, and watched the flames dance. She felt a sense of peace and gratitude. The prairie, which had once seemed harsh and unforgiving, had become a place of learning, resilience, and quiet strength. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew she was ready to face them. Eli remained nearby, keeping watch, but his eyes often softened as he looked at Clara. He had seen her journey from fear to courage, from uncertainty to trust, and he felt a quiet pride. The prairie had tested them both, but it had also shown them the value of patience, care, and human connection. In the stillness of the night, the cabin glowed with warmth and light. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly, a vast and beautiful landscape full of challenges and possibilities. Inside, two people had found safety, trust, and hope. Clara had discovered her inner strength, and Eli had found satisfaction in seeing her grow and thrive. For Clara, this was not just survival. It was a new beginning. She had learned that courage, trust, and persistence could carry her through the most difficult times. And for Eli, it was a reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, kindness, patience, and careful guidance could create safety, growth, and hope. As the fire burned low and the night deepened, Clara closed her eyes with a sense of calm. She had faced fear, embraced learning, and discovered courage she had not known she possessed. The prairie, vast and challenging, had become a place of transformation, and she was ready to face whatever came next with confidence, resilience, and hope.